Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Thanks so much for having me here today. So my name is Beth O'Connor, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I am 61 years old. The other really important number in my life is that I have 28 years of sobriety, which tells you that I used drugs, and my primary drug was methamphetamine until I was 32 years old. At 32, I had really destroyed most of my life. I say that I had worked my way down the corporate ladder because despite having a degree from Berkeley, I had not been able to hold a job because I have my drug addiction. Every job was less responsibility, less money, and I held it for less time. But even more than that, I was physically debilitated. My body was really breaking down. I was having a lot of problems. And of course, I was emotionally devastated. I was feeling hopeless. I saw no way out. I had been living like this for a very long time. And I finally, at 32 years old, decided that maybe I should go to recovery. Now, for me to get to that point at 32 was actually a fairly intricate path. So I started out in a family that had a lot of chaos in it. My mother was really volatile. She wasn't really bonded to me. But the real problems escalated when she married my stepfather when I was 9 years old. He was verbally, emotionally, physically, and sexually abusive. And so I lived in a house where I was under constant threat. Now, the threat wasn't always carried out on a daily basis, but I never knew when things were going to go off the rails. And no matter what I did to try to satisfy him, it was never enough because his violence really wasn't about me at all. So as a potential source of relief, I started using alcohol when I was 12 years old, and I moved on to pot, then pills, then acid, LSD. And then I found my drug of choice when I was 16 years old, which was methamphetamine. At 17, I was shooting up meth on a regular basis and was in full bore addiction when I graduated from high school. I did manage to go to Berkeley for college, and I did better with my drug use for the first 3.5 years, but I had a really violent multi-assailant rape, and then I moved in with an abusive boyfriend, and I just couldn't hold it together anymore, and I turned to the old familiar belief of meth. And I started using again on a daily basis. And that was the beginning of the next 10-year slide down to being 32 years old. So finally, I am ready to go into recovery house, into rehab. And, I believe I'm going for medical treatment. I went to a women's program in the Bay Area. And it so happened that on my first day, they did a step study every day, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And my first day, they were doing step 3. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God of my understanding. And so, being the good student that I was, I raised my hand and I said, what about me? I'm an atheist. And I also don't believe in turning my will and my life over. And they told me that that was the only option. There was only one way to get sober, and it was the 12-step way. Well, this is a problem because I know I can't do that. It's not going to work for me. And so I really had to decide within, a week, what the heck am I going to do? And so I decided that I was going to leave my mind and my ears open and listen for the ideas that I thought would be useful to me and just ignore everything else. And there were a lot of good ideas. I mean, the Recovery House taught me things about substance use disorder, which is the modern name for addiction. They taught me things like how to recognize and handle triggers. They recommended building a social support network, a lot of useful techniques and information. And even when I went to 12-step meetings, there were useful ideas there, useful for me. The 12 steps works well for a lot of people. It just wasn't right for me, but some of the ideas I could apply. So for example, they focus on one day at a time. And for me, when I was having a really heavy craving day in the beginning, I would tell myself, I'm just not going to use today. I'm not deciding for tomorrow, but for today, I'm not going to use. And so I did that. I pulled all the different ideas that I could and tried to build a plan that would work for me. But I still really vacillated between some confidence that I could recover my way and without a higher power and without agreeing that I was powerless. I mean, really apprehension when faced with the universal consensus that I could not. So when I got home, I went to the library to see if there were other options that they hadn't told me about. And it turns out that there were. And by the way, I went to the library because it's 1994 and there is no Google. Okay, I could not just look it up on the computer. So I did find options. Women for Sobriety is a self-empowerment program that focuses on building up your competence and your confidence. Rational Recovery, which is basically now SMART, focused on relapse prevention, and SOS, which is basically now Life-Ring Secular Recovery, focused on rational decision-making, group support, and each addict being responsible for her own recovery. So I did what I had started to do from the beginning. I read everything I could get my hands on. I read the books for all the different programs. I went to meetings for all the different programs. And I put together the ideas that I found useful. And that's what today would be called building a personal recovery plan. That terminology didn't exist then, but now it's a bit more common. And so I use those same techniques to build up my confidence and competence in handling my sobriety, also in recognizing that it's not possible to recover from everything all at once or to repair all the damage. So part of my plan was recognizing that I needed to prioritize. What are the areas of my life I need to work on first? What are the goals for those areas, and what steps are the first steps to be taken to head in the right direction? And that's what I did. And I would revise my plan intermittently because I had accomplished some goals and I was ready for more. And I also really had to stand back and force myself to look backward and see how far I had come. Because for me, I was really aware of what I hadn't accomplished yet, of my losses that I still hadn't remedied, of what I wanted that I wasn't able to have. But by forcing myself to stop and look backward and see that I was on such a positive path and I was moving forward in so many areas, it really gave me the strength to keep facing new challenges. And so these were the kind of techniques that I used in all areas of my life, including recovering from the trauma, which showed up as PTSD-related anxiety. I had to work on that. And then it was also about my professional growth. So when I got out of rehab, and again, I'm 32 years old with a Berkeley degree, I had to get for my first job, a part-time, temporary, low-level administrative job, because that's all I could handle. For me to get up every day and go to work on time, stay all day, do a good job, and go back the next day and do it again and do it again, I was 32 and I had never done that. So I needed the experience of getting my feet underneath me. And then my second job was a full-time mid-level administrative job. My third job was a supervisor job in a larger company. And at 6 years sober, I went to law school at Berkeley again, and I did worked at a big law firm. Then I did class action work for the government. And in 2014, I was appointed a federal administrative law judge, a position from which I retired in 2020 to do advocacy work about recovery, including multiple paths. And I do this around my book's title, which is From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction.
Hey, wow, what an amazing accomplishment. You know, when I read your bio and I saw where you came from to where you are now, it just totally blew me away. I was saying to you earlier, I mentor and coach a lot of young women who have derailed due to family circumstances like yourself. Some of these kids have just fallen into the wrong set of friends, the wrong hands. Now, there must have been something in you that made you realize I've hit rock bottom. I've got to make a change. What was that? If you can go back to that formative younger you, and what 3 nuggets of wisdom could you give another young woman, another young person who's listening to this podcast on how they can turn themselves around and get out of the rut they're in?
So one thing I would say about that is that we don't really talk in terms of rock bottom anymore. Rock bottom has always been sort of retrospective. Where was the worst point? And I moved up from there. But I would say to the women that you're talking about, the people that you're talking about, the younger generation, if you can intervene in your life and get yourself help earlier, the earlier you do it, the better off you're going to be. Whether that's help for your trauma, for any mental health issues, or for any substance use disorders. You don't have to wait until you've lost everything. Many people are able to take steps to do the work to repair themselves and to get sober and to heal long before they would hit what traditionally would be viewed as a bottom. And that is to your advantage. You will have destroyed fewer parts of your life. You will have less to repair, and you will have lost fewer years. So that is always advantageous. For me, I was 32 years old. And so, not a young woman anymore. I had been using drugs for 20 years. I had been really a meth addict for 16 with a brief respite in college where I was better for a little while. And I just really couldn't go forward anymore. I was so exhausted emotionally, mentally. I couldn't even get a resume together to try to find another job. The other side was that my partner, now husband, he was really through with me. And that was a factor, but I was also just ready. I will also say, though, when I went into recovery, it's not as if I went in with this 100% certainty that I could get sober or even 100% commitment. So again, don't wait for that. What I thought was, maybe there's help for me there. I should go there and find out, as well as at least it'll give me sort of a break and a breather, and I can have some repair of myself emotionally and physically if I just have some downtime. It wasn't until I got in and started to do the work that I started to gain confidence that I might actually be able to find a path of sobriety for myself and therefore be able to have, sort of the happy and productive life that I really wanted.
I read your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal from how you overcame addiction without God. Very, very interesting piece. Tell us a little bit about that op-ed and why you decided to share it.
So I am 100% supportive of people for whom the 12-step model of recovery works. If it's a good fit, that is great. Congratulations, you found your people. The problem arises when people in recovery are told that that's the only way. First of all, it's not true. And sometimes they're told it's a better way, but that also isn't true. There's studies that have compared AA and LifeRing and Women for Sobriety and SMART and found they're all basically equally effective. What I want to do and what I intended to do with that op-ed about getting sober without God was to raise awareness that there are many paths to recovery. There are different types of peer support groups. And what's important is that the person entering recovery is made aware of what their options are so that they can find the right place for them, and that will increase their odds of success. My goal is always to provide information so people have a better chance of succeeding in their sobriety journey.
Yeah, there's different paths to the same destination. And a lot of people are kind of channeled down the religious path. If they're not religious, they fall by the wayside. And it's beautiful to know that there's so many different options out there.
And I would say, and it, it's not just about the religion. The 12 steps focus on this idea of turning your will and your life over, of a powerless. The other programs really focus on self-empowerment. And so there are a lot of people in the other programs who have personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs, but they like the self-empowered approach better than they like the 12-step approach. So there's multiple reasons for someone to pick one program or the other. I always suggest just read up on them. One or two of them are going to appeal to you. One or two of them are going to feel like these are where my people would be. Go to those meetings. That's the right place for you.
I love that. Now, why do you think it's important for us to talk about these issues? Breaking the silence behind addiction and how people get involved with it.
Well, I titled my memoir From Junkie to Judge on purpose, because I feel that there is a sort of a hierarchy of addiction in society, at least in America. Where it's better to abuse alcohol than to abuse meth. It's better to pop pills than to shoot drugs. And I was an intravenous methamphetamine addict, which is often viewed as sort of almost hopeless, almost beyond help. And so I wanted to make people aware that no matter what substance you use or how you consume it, that there is a path to recovery for you. And it's important as well, I think, for society to understand that we don't want to write anyone off. Everyone is capable of finding recovery. I know sometimes people focus on how high the relapse rate is and how, for each individual attempt at sobriety, there's a high percentage of people that fail, the vast majority. But the truth is that over time, about 75% of people with a substance use disorder will find recovery. They just don't often find it on the first attempt. And so it's my focus is just to encourage people to look for the right fit and to try to encourage society to not give up on people no matter where they are. There is always hope. We will all be better off if we can find a way to help those people who are struggling with their substance use disorder.
On that note, if there are any parents, any family members who have someone who is struggling, sometimes it's difficult to keep going. Sometimes they try different options. They put someone in rehab, they relapse. What advice can you give to family, to parents who have a member who's struggling with addiction?
So there's a couple answers to that. One is that we have been moving away from the idea of tough love. It's the recommendation today is that the family members, to the extent they can, try to keep a relationship with a person struggling with a substance use disorder. If that person feels loved and supported, they're more likely to be able to do the hard work of recovery. Now, that doesn't mean that the family members can't set appropriate boundaries. And what's appropriate or what, that family wants to do varies, from circumstance to circumstance. But loving someone, being supportive, helping them find help when they're ready, that doesn't mean that you have to allow yourself to be financially abused or verbally abused. Those can be good boundaries. The other thought I would say is that there's a lot of focus today on harm reduction and how it can be important to understand that not everyone is going to go right to abstinence, but that for some people it's a process. And so things like having drugs that aren't tainted with fentanyl, or that you can test to see what the fentanyl is in there, or having access to safe to clean needles so that people don't get diseases if they're IV drug users, or recognizing that sometimes people do recovery in steps. They may feel that their alcohol use disorder is worse than their marijuana use disorder, and so they'll deal with the alcohol first and the pot later. And so it's important that the family let the individual try to figure out what the right path forward is. And it's the same for treatment. Sometimes family members get insistent that the person with a substance use disorder must do inpatient treatment or must do what they think is best. But there's a lot of factors to consider in what type of treatment will work best. And it's really important to let the person with the disorder be the decider as far as what's the right next step. And the other thing I would say to family members is patience. Recovery is rarely going to be as fast or as smooth as you would hope, and actually as the person with a substance use disorder would hope, right? When I got into recovery, I sure wanted to be fixed a lot faster than was realistic. So being patient and realistic about it can really be a help as well.
That's a really nice solution. Now, social impact. What is your social impact project, and why are you passionate about it?
Yeah, so I advocate now about multiple paths to recovery as my primary focus. I also talk about the connection between trauma and abuse and substance use disorder. And so my book, I really view as part of my advocacy. I do podcasts. I speak at conferences. I go to recovery houses and talk to them. I have the op-eds. All of this is really my intention to make people aware that there are multiple recovery options. And again, just to increase the odds that more people will succeed when they try to get sober. I feel like it's an important message that isn't as well known as the faith-based 12-step model. And I just want to do what I can to expose people to the ideas. That's also related to family. So one of the reasons I do speak, and I speak to a friends and family group for LifeRing once a month. Sometimes the family member only heard of 12 steps. And if their son or daughter with an addiction says, I don't want to do AA or NA, I want to go do LifeRing or Women for Sobriety, sometimes the family can get afraid or push back because they never heard of these other programs. So I feel that by making there be a more general awareness that there are options, the family members also can benefit because they won't be as concerned if their son or daughter or spouse chooses a program other than a 12-step program.
In everything we do in life, I believe in the power of giving. You are giving your time, you are giving your story, you're giving the essence of who you are to help other people in the world. Why is giving so important for the future of humanity, do you think?
I think we are a community, and we are all better off if we help each other. It reminded me, I saw something on Facebook today about how people 65 and older shouldn't have to pay for schools because they don't have children that use them. Well, I never had a child that used a school, and yet I always voted for a tax increase on myself and my husband in order to pay for schools, because I'm better off, my community is better off by doing that. And that's how I view this giving as well. I also do feel that a lot of people aren't able to speak out about their recovery or their addiction, especially about an IV meth addiction, the way I can. I am a retired judge. So I am able to stand up and say my truth and my story and my recovery without the professional consequences that some people worry about, and that can actually happen. It's a valid concern. So I feel sort of an obligation to stand up for the many people who aren't able to do so. And that, I view this as my sort of part-time retirement job, is to do what I can as a social positive, to have a social positive impact.
So what changed your life when someone gave to you?
When I was in recovery, even though I did do it a way that was right for me, even though I built my own recovery plan, it doesn't mean that I did it by myself. I still developed relationships in recovery. I listened to people who had suggestions or ideas. I didn't always accept them, but I listened. And I will say that my husband was a good partner in my recovery. He really supported me. Now, don't get me wrong. At some point, he wasn't going to stay with me if I couldn't get my addiction under control. But once he saw positive steps, he really was on my side, and he was patient most of the time, as far as what could reasonably be accomplished by me in what period of time. So all of those were very big helps. And I did also, do therapy, individual counseling, group therapy, couples counseling, also a great help to me as I was trying to deal with my childhood trauma, with the sexual assaults, and with my addiction and the ramifications of my addiction.
Is there anything I should have asked you and I didn't? What are your parting thoughts for us today?
I just want to encourage everyone to have some confidence that if they are struggling either with an abuse history, a trauma history, a mental health issue, including a substance use disorder, there really is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you can find the sort of little bit of confidence you need to start on that right path. I do view my life as having had many different challenges that combined made me susceptible to a substance use disorder. And that's the path that I took. But also, I was able to find my way out. And when I say that as well, I do want to say that becoming a judge, it's sort of a marker and there's a societal resonance, but it's not the most important part of my recovery. The most important part of my recovery is the lack of chaos. I'm not creating new problems for myself. It's also the ability to, be a good friend, a good family member, to have this commitment to helping my community, but also to be happy and productive. There is great joy and great contentment in being a productive person and in enjoying your life. And all of that required that I have healing from the many different traumas and abuses and from my addiction.
Mary Beth, thank you so much for this amazing interview. It's an absolute honor to have been able to spend this time with you. Thank you for sharing your story. I do hope that this story becomes the light at the end of the tunnel for somebody who's listening as well.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a great, joy to be able to talk with you. And I know we have the mutual goal of offering help to people wherever we can. And hopefully this will provide value as well. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story movement is attracting some phenomenal women who are bearing their souls, who are sharing their stories to uplift, inspire, energize, and motivate somebody who's needing help. Tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing woman. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. Bye for now. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.